Billy Ray Jessup was a boy born of the red Georgia clay. He grew up where the air was thick with the scent of pine and the drone of cicadas. His world was small. It was a town of peeling paint on clapboard houses and Sunday sermons that promised salvation. But Billy Ray didn't seek salvation in a church pew. He found it in the rhythm of words. He listened to rap music on a crackling radio, sounds from cities far away. He dreamed of a different life, a life where his name was known beyond the county line. He wanted to be a star. He believed his rhymes were his ticket out. His words were sharp, forged in the quiet desperation of a place that time seemed to forget. He was going to make them all listen. His early life was a simple story. His father worked at the local mill, a man of few words and calloused hands. His mother kept a clean house and worried about his soul. They were plain folk. They did not understand the fire in their son. They did not understand his notebooks, filled with scrawled verses about struggle and escape. He spent his nights in his room, a beat machine borrowed from a friend thumping softly through the floorboards. He practiced his flow. He perfected his delivery. He was building a new identity, one rhyme at a time. The boy they knew was disappearing. In his place, a performer was being born, hungry for the spotlight he felt he deserved. He called himself Billy Blaze. It was a name that promised fire and light. He started performing at local talent shows, at high school parties, anywhere a crowd would gather. At first, they were curious. A white boy rapping about life in their small town. It was a novelty, but then they heard him. They heard the passion. They heard the raw, unfiltered truth of his lyrics. He rapped about the boredom, the dead-end jobs, the feeling of being trapped. And the kids, they understood. They felt it too. He became a local hero. His name was whispered in school hallways. His homemade tapes were passed from hand to hand. Fame, even on a small scale, began to change him. He liked the attention. He liked the way people looked at him. But it was not enough. The local praise was a small taste of a much larger feast he craved. He saw the bigger world on television, a world of wealth and adoration that seemed impossibly distant. And anger started to grow inside him, a bitter seed planted in the soil of his ambition. He felt isolated, even when surrounded by fans. They loved Billy Blaze, the rapper. But no one knew Billy Ray Jessup, the boy who was afraid he would never be good enough. The applause started to sound hollow. The loneliness grew louder than the beat. The anger needed a place to go. It was a poison in his veins. The rhymes were no longer enough to contain it. The darkness that had always lurked in the corners of his mind began to seep into the center. One night, after a show, the cheering faded and the familiar emptiness returned. He was driving on a long, dark country road. He saw a figure walking on the shoulder. A stranger. A nobody. A sudden cold impulse seized him. It was a thought he had never allowed himself to truly form before. But now it was clear. It was sharp. It was a new kind of power. He pulled the car over. The world went quiet except for the pounding in his own chest. His first victim was a drifter, a man whose absence would not be immediately noticed. There was no plan. There was only a raw, explosive release of fury. It was messy. It was brutal. Afterward, standing in the silence of the woods, Billy Ray felt a strange calm. The gnawing anxiety that had plagued him for years was gone, replaced by a cold, clear certainty. He had crossed a line, and he found that he did not want to go back. He had discovered a secret, a terrible, thrilling secret. He had the power of life and death. This was a fame no one could give him. It was a power he could take for himself. He had found a new stage. He continued to make music. He performed at his regular spots. He smiled for the local paper. He was the hometown boy making good. No one saw the change, but it was there. It was in his eyes, a new hardness, a chilling detachment. The killings became more frequent. He chose his victims carefully, people on the margins, people who would not be missed right away. He learned to be meticulous. He learned to cover his tracks. The acts themselves were a ritual, a way to silence the noise in his head. The brutality was the point. It was a way to make the world feel as ugly and chaotic as he felt inside. His music began to change too. The lyrics grew darker, more violent. His fans thought it was part of his act. They thought it was art imitating life. They cheered for the aggression. They saw it as raw authenticity. They did not know it was a confession. He was hiding in plain sight. He was telling them exactly who he was, but they could not hear the truth. They only heard the beat. The applause felt different now. It was a validation of his mask. It was proof of how well he could lie. Every cheer, every sold-out local show was a testament to the monster he had become and the perfect way he concealed it. The town lived in a state of quiet fear. People were disappearing. First it was a whisper, a rumor. A man who worked odd jobs vanished. Then a young woman who had recently moved to town. The disappearances were unconnected, or so it seemed. The county sheriff, a man accustomed to dealing with minor thefts and neighborly disputes, was overwhelmed. There were no witnesses. There were no leads. A cloud of unease settled over the community. Doors were locked earlier at night. People looked at strangers with suspicion. The simple trust that had defined the town was beginning to erode, replaced by a creeping dread. No one suspected the local celebrity. Billy Ray watched the fear grow, and he enjoyed it. He read the newspaper articles about the missing persons. He listened to the worried conversations in the town diner. He felt like a god, moving unseen among mortals, holding their peace of mind in his hands. This secret power was more intoxicating than any standing ovation. It was real. It was absolute. His double life was a masterpiece of deception. By day, he was Billy Blaze, the sympathetic local artist. By night, he was a predator, a ghost who haunted the lonely roads and quiet corners of the county he called home. He felt invincible. The mistake was small, a moment of carelessness. He had taken a wallet from his latest victim, a trophy, a foolish, arrogant impulse. He had tossed it into a storm drain miles from the crime scene. But a heavy rain and a city maintenance crew brought it back to the surface. Inside the wallet was the driver's license of a man who had been reported missing for weeks. The police canvassed the area where it was found. It was near a small recording studio, the same studio where Billy Blaze rented time. It was a thin thread, but it was a thread. The sheriff, desperate for a break, started looking closer at the people who frequented the area. Investigators began to piece things together. They looked at the dates of the disappearances. They noticed a pattern. Many of them occurred on the same nights Billy Blaze had performed in town. They analyzed his newer, darker lyrics. What once seemed like artistic expression now read like a diary of violence. They got a warrant to search his home. Tucked away in a loose floorboard in his bedroom, they found them. Mementos from his victims, a cheap necklace, a pocket knife, a set of keys. The mask was finally ripped away. The town's beloved rapper, the boy with the big dreams, was a killer. The truth was more horrifying than anyone could have imagined. The news broke like a dam. It flooded the town with shock and disbelief. Billy Blaze, their Billy Blaze, a serial killer? It was impossible. It had to be a mistake. People who had cheered for him, who had bought his tapes, who had felt a sense of pride in his local fame, were forced to confront a monstrous reality. The face they had seen on stage was a lie. The voice they had admired had been whispering about murder. The community's reaction was a mixture of horror and betrayal. They had let a wolf into their homes. They had celebrated him. They had sung along to his confessions. The trial was a spectacle. The courtroom was packed every day. The people of the town came to see the monster for themselves. They wanted to understand. How could this have happened? How could the boy they knew have become this thing? Billy Ray Jessup sat in the courtroom, quiet and emotionless. The fire was gone. The performer was gone. All that was left was a hollow shell. The evidence was overwhelming. The stories of his crimes were laid bare for all to see. The gruesome details silenced the courtroom. The community listened, and in their silence they grieved. They grieved for the victims, and in a strange, complicated way, they grieved for the boy they thought they knew. His fall was as dramatic as the rise he had once dreamed of. He went from a local hero to a national headline. His story was a chilling cautionary tale. It spoke of the darkness that can hide behind a familiar face. It revealed how dreams, when twisted by loneliness and rage, can curdle into nightmares. The name Billy Blaze was no longer associated with music and ambition. It was now a synonym for brutality and deceit. His music was pulled from local radio. His tapes were thrown away. His legacy was not one of fame, but of infamy. He had achieved the notoriety he always wanted, but it was a fame born of blood. The town of his birth would never be the same. The murders left a scar on the collective memory, a deep and lasting wound. The story of Billy Ray Jessup became a local legend, a ghost story told to frighten children. But for the adults who had lived through it, it was a reminder of a terrible truth, that evil is not always a stranger. sometimes it is the person you cheer for. The story of the white rapper who became a serial killer served as a permanent, chilling reminder of the darkness that can lurk just beneath the surface of a small, quiet American town, forever changing the way they saw their neighbors and the world.